I got not, you.
I'm going to start by having you say and spell your complete name, please.
The camera on.
Camera is on.
Tom Bacher. That's Bacher. Bacher. My formal name is Thomas J., but I go by Tom Bacher.
Okay. Tom, tell me about what unit you served with in the 10th Mountain Division in training and in battle.
I was 87th Regiment, Company C, a rifle company.
And tell me your position served within that company.
I was a BAR man in one of the squad. Each squad has one automatic rifle, which is something like a machine gun, but it's a combination like a machine gun and a rifle. Automatically fires 20 rounds and the magazine has to be reloaded.
And tell me the highest rank served, please.
Every bit of private first class.
I'd like you to tell me just a little bit about your personal experience at Spiazzi in Italy, serving with 87 1st Battalion, please.
Spiazzi is the last action I was involved, sequentially, you know that. Spiazzi is located about 4 or 5 miles, about 1,500 feet up, I'm guessing on this, from Lake Garda. And we were in reserve in a town named Garda, which is about 1/3 up on the lake. That would be on the east side. And all at once, we sleeping on the ground. We didn't even dig a foxhole there. Fall out, and up we go at night, go up 6 miles through orchards and fields, stumbling, not knowing exactly where we were. And that's the 1st Battalion of 87. A and B Company, best I know, was already up there a day before, and we were going to go around and circle above Spiazzi, so the morning attack, we would block the Germans' ability to abandon Spiazzi on the direction that we were going to block, meaning away from the A and B Company. So you want me to continue with the story?
Yes, please do.
So the morning came, and A and B Company, and with some mortar support, started to fight again. They fought the day before. That was a training guard for special forces, supposedly maybe some SS people too, training for mountain infantry. It was a tough outfit. And I was left up there with my BAR is a 3-man team, and my assistant gunner, my ammunition carrier, and I stayed up on the top. When my platoon moved on, my company moved on, and I covered for my platoon, making sure that the Germans would stay in the building, and snipers would be limited and so on. So I was firing my BAR on that. And as I told you earlier, I sketched a drawing of that. I don't know whether this will show up properly, but here I am on the top of the hill firing down into the building.
Can you hold that up for me just one moment, please? You're a very talented woodworker.
It's a pen sketch.
Oh, it's a pen sketch. I thought it was a woodcut. Excuse me.
No, and it reproduces. I had the original about 4 times bigger than that. These are all reproduction of them.
Wow, that's really impressive.
And it's an ink sketch because they reproduce nice.
That is really beautiful. Now, this is your recollection of what happened to you in the Spiazzi attack, April 29th, 1945.
Correct. We just settled down at the village of Garda, on the shore of Lake Garda. We were dead tired and hungry. C Company was in reserve. Other units were ahead of us north on the road along the lake. Maybe we can get a night's sleep, even if it's only on the ground, lying next to our weapons. It was about 11 p.m. Move out, the orders came, up the hill. about 10 miles, 1,000 feet vertical, feet higher. We just staggered in columns, up the trails, across orchards, farms, or whatever. Most of the time we did not exactly know where we were. Our scouts just kept moving. In the darkness we could see a village. It was Spiazzi. We circled around quietly, interrupted only by some sporadic mortar and machine gun fire. At dawn we looked down a mountain village which the Germans were occupying. With daylight the attack started. A and D companies, I'm sorry I said B, but it's D, companies were moving from below. C company got the orders to attack. My BAR team remained on the hill behind the town to cover our advancing platoon. The fight started. Mortars, bazookas, grenades, small arm fires. It lasted only a half hour or so. White flags appeared from a building, and we surrender was heard. Prisoners, some wounded, were quickly rounded up. Soon we were left our BAR position and descended into the village. As we walked down one of the narrow roads, a large explosion in a building in front of me knocked me down. A safe has been booby-trapped and exploded. As I got up, my ears were ringing. My face was slightly burning, but I was not seriously hurt. 2 A company men were killed and several wounded. When my squad sergeant met me, he said, "You look awful. Are you okay?" I replied, "We all look awful." He told me to take some of the prisoners back and to check in the aid station. When the medics looked at me, they put me in an ambulance with a tag, brain concussion. I was too tired to argue. For me, the war was over. The next day, the war was over in Italy for everyone.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about your own experience at the Po River, coming up to it, and perhaps what you can do is sort of set the scene for me about what your experience was coming into the dike area at the Po.
Okay, well, I don't know exact location, but within a mile from the Po River on the south side is where we settled in for the next day attack. We didn't know that there was going to be an attack across the river. At least I didn't know it. The general probably was thinking about it. In the morning we moved up. They brought the boats up, I understand, about 10, 11 o'clock. A and B Company of the 1st Battalion of 87 crossed the river first. The Germans didn't expect anybody come across a river with no bridge, with no ability to have heavy artillery support, with tanks crossing, with supplies being provided. And we were very much surprised that we're crossing the river right now, because even though the Germans were en route to some degree, a major river like this isn't crossed without major strategic consideration of supplies and so forth and so on. A and B companies crossed. When they got on the other side of the bank, and we were on the south side, they crossed to the north side, the Germans discovered them. And up to them, they really didn't believe it would have happened. And they opened up not only 88 and some mortar shells, but AK guns. The 88 was converted to explosion airburst. And we took pretty heavy casualties because of that before we crossed. And the engineers brought the boat back, and they were kind of scared. You know, they were not used to day-to-day combat like that, but that's an editorial comment from an infantryman. And they said, "You guys row across." Well, you know, I happen to be a kayaker. So I ended up in the end, like I told you, I was somewhat of a character. Here's the picture of the assault boats. I checked this very close with a few people who crossed these boats. They were steel. They had no motor on them. They had paddles. They held for 10 to 12 people. It was probably overloaded. We had no life preserver with us. We didn't have anything on. We kept our ammunition belt or hand grenades. I had 240 rounds of 30-06 ammunition on me. I would have gone down like a lead. So we got into that, got on, rode across, shells exploding, but as we got to the North Shore, we got away from some of the shelling because they were shelling the South Shore where the next battalion and so forth was ready to cross the river. And then I'm reading the same thing. Excuse me?
Continue telling it in your own words.
Yeah, I would probably add a few more comments if we keep moving.
And so they were shelling you, and they were shelling the south side. You had just come across to the north side, correct?
Correct. And we on the north side, and our job was to leapfrog A and B Company and establish a beachhead, which we did. And so happened, I was the scout on that. And I don't know how much war stories you got, but a scout is fundamentally a target. There's no way you're going to discover a camouflage hidden person in a window behind where it's dark or on a hedgerow. And I had a replacement, a guy who just joined us 2-3 weeks ago. And, replacement, they shake pretty hard for 2-3 weeks, like we all do. When you first get into combat, it's scary as hell. If you tell them you weren't scary, you weren't in real combat. When bullets and artillery guns and minefields are there, and you see fellow soldiers getting wounded or killed, it's a tough going. And he just dragged back there. So I was about 200 yards ahead of my company, my platoon, I'm sorry. And I hollered at my squad sergeant, Pop Gilman, come on up. So he runs up, I'm kneeling down a hedgerow, and here's Gus. I still can see him on this hedgerow, just shaking and kneeling down and shaking. And to us it was almost funny. I don't know what's funny about it, somebody being scared, but you become a fatalist, you don't get scared. And I said, Pop, either get me another scout here or I move out by myself. What do you want to do? So he turns to Gus. This is a funny story considering the situation. And he said, what are you worrying about, Gus? He said, what do you mean? Any one of those buildings and trees and hedgerows could have Germans in it. Yeah, maybe so. But I don't know why you worry. And he said, well, what, you got some G2 intelligence information that said there's nobody ahead of us or the war is over? Or what are you talking about? Well, look at it this way, Gus. The 2nd Battalion is crossing. The other regiments are crossing. The field artillery is zeroing into areas that we give them command to. The Air Force is supporting us when they are on. The whole damn 5th Army is behind you. I mean, he was absolutely right. Gus, I, and Pop were the front of the whole 5th Army that day, at that moment. And I said, come on, Gus, let's move. And we moved on. Well, we went another 200-300 yards. And very unfortunately, a fire started and all of that. And my assistant gunner, Bill Stard, got killed right in front of me. Now, interesting, Stard sprained his ankle or tore up a tendon down there. And he only, in total, he just came back from the hospital. He only seen 3 or 4 days of combat, and he got killed. It was very tough for me to see a good friend like this getting killed right in front of me.
Can you set the scene for me a little bit about what was the strategic importance of the 10th crossing the Po, the role of the 87th at the Po?
Well, if you look at the map of Italy, and Embry's map being pretty good, very good as a matter of fact, after we broke out from the hills, which was, after all, the major line, defensive line for the Germans for a long time, Belvedere and River Ridge broke first of it, then the other mountains. So we breaking out. When you got to the Po River, the Germans were giving up, but they also politically wanted a negotiated team, so the command said, keep fighting, maybe we get a negotiate, not an unconditional surrender. So it wasn't a cakewalk. We lost people, and they had mines, they had tanks on the south side. I'm sure strategically they considered the Po River a major opportunity to slow that offensive down. I mean, it's a big river. I went back there with Nicodemus, my sergeant, on the 1994. I always thought maybe I'm just thinking it's bigger than it is. It is a big river, and it was a spring runoff. And if that river isn't considered a strategic river, a defensive line, then I don't understand the war. And here's the general, and I had a great respect for him, even though I wasn't exactly volunteering for this 1st Battalion crossing. He just said, they're running. Before they know, let's get them across. He didn't get command from the top. As a matter of fact, they argued about it. That's written up. The command said, well, your flanks are opposed. I don't care. We're going to keep moving. And so happened my battalion and my company was one of the leading companies, and with him the day was over. There were other regiments crossing downriver and other places which I'm not particularly familiar with. To me, the war is half a mile around me.
As you were crossing the Po, what were you thinking?
I was thinking, get my ass across, because there was less fire on the north side than the south side. They were dumping mortar shells on the river, which was kind of a waste of time. The German mortar shell sensitivity to hit something and explode was not as good as American, which exploded on the top of it. They went down about a foot or so. If you look at my sketches, you see this water fountain coming up. That's because they went maybe down a foot or so. And so we didn't get the fragments from those mortar shells, which was very important because we're lobbing quite a few of them around. And they were wasting their time. I'm surprised they did that. So my thinking is get the hell across and just keep moving. I mean, there's no big picture in your mind when you get across, you get there, and you keep moving. Now, if you want a little funny story, I have time, I'll tell you.
Sure, go ahead.
As I got on the other side, I told you I was a character. I was an interpreter because I still spoke German since I was born in Vienna and grew up in Budapest. I spoke German at home. I was also had a field artillery training, so I assisted sometime with a forward observer. I was a BAR man. I had a camera with me, which was not legal. And I was, a character, not a hero. Big difference. I was just a character. And there's my sergeant who now got a battlefield commission. We still called him we called him Sergeant Spark, even though he had a lieutenant. He was about 150 feet down from me on a boat ahead of me. And I was the only one across I got the boat there. I didn't even get wet. Everybody else got wet. That didn't matter. It was a spring day. And I holler, hey, Sergeant, get over here. Come over here. And, PFC Bacher hooting, hollering, and Lieutenant, get your ass over here. He finally, what you want? What you got? We got orders, we got to move out. Well, you fought at Kiska. Yeah, what the hell Kiska got to do with this? Well, that Pacific ribbon you got with the arrowhead for amphibious landing, you deserve it now. He says, get the hell out, you scout. That's the reason I was scout for that little 200 yards. That's the humor that kept us going. And everybody's laughing when the guy's getting hurt and killed behind us and probably ahead of us too in a few minutes, as I described it.
Boy, I tell you, what is it about the 10th guys? You all have a great sense of humor.
Well, there's a lot of funny stories, but that one, they were so proud, and rightfully, having a Pacific ribbon. Very few army outfits fought both wars, an experience that I think very, very few people had the opportunity to be involved. Just a few days before, well, April 2nd, I was called.
Okay.
On April 6th, early in the morning, I was called to company headquarters.
Tell me.
Company headquarters, and said, here's a jeep, we're going to take you back and you're going to attend a funeral. A funeral, yeah, the first funeral that the company has. And by that time, about 250 people have been killed in action. This is just about the line that from which we jumped off for the Po Valley. So it's quite a bit forward of these many actions that our divisions fought. So I go back and change clothes, put my Eisenhower jacket on, you know, wash my face. I guess I shaved, and they give me 30 minutes to do that. And of course, distance is not that much. So another 20 miles later, we have this funeral arrangement. And there's the general. There's three chaplains, a Jewish, a Protestant, and a Catholic minister or rabbi. There's a band, there's a program, and the whole division was represented by 8 people. I got the picture of it here. And the general gets up there, and and there's all the crosses behind us. This was a temporary military cemetery. Later on, they moved the bodies either back to the United States by request, or to the Florence one that they are buried now. And he said, before I start the program, let me explain why only so few of you guys over here. That's because our mission is to fight a war, not to attend ceremonies. This is a very important ceremony, but I wanted to make that statement. So let's get on with the program. And he done a very respectable, touching story about the casualties, what it means to the family, what it meant to him, to us who were there. And the whole program included, the music, the bugle, the speeches, the religious thing. It lasted about 30 minutes or so, maybe 40. And then we went down, and I went down to Sargeant Brown, Louis Brown, who was a good friend of mine, who got killed. Now, this is the second funeral I attended him by our standard, because I happened to be, he got killed at a night artillery shell, and I happened to be the guy who helped to dig him out from the rubbles, because he was in a kind of forward position in some kind of building or rubbles. And then we carried him down to the Jeep at night, and I even, today, difficult for me to explain, but I got his blood all over my khaki wool pants. I don't know how much blood, but my whole pants was wet. And I didn't get a new pair of pants for about 8 to 10 days before I went back to a shower unit. So I not only remember him dying, he was dead when we picked him up, badly shut up. I said goodbye to him then when I put him on a Jeep. This is my second funeral now. And 1948, I moved to Portland, and a widow lived there. And when they brought his body back to bury him, I ended up being a pallbearer. What do you call it, a pall carrier?
A pallbearer?
Pallbearer. So I buried that friend 3 times. And I'm not a softy. I'm pretty tough. But that probably the toughest thing I ever done in a war, to bury a good friend of mine 3 times.
Okay, and go ahead and tell me a little bit about your own experience on Belvedere.
Well, as most people know, and I don't even pronounce the little town, Videosati, we were...
Vidistiatico?
What?
Vidiciatico?
That's the one. Thank you very much. I can't speak English. I can't speak, forgot my German. I can't speak Italian. I'm in bad shape. But anyway, so we were there. I just called the front line. It was within artillery range. That's my recollection, 2-3 days. And then the night we moved out to a little, I thought it was only 2-3 buildings. Corona, I believe, is the name of the town, or what are the buildings. And we moved out after dark. And it was my recollection, maybe I think it's 11 o'clock or midnight. We move up a hill. Which way? Up the hill. Which direction? Up the hill. Well, we just no more started to move up, and it turns out the general's son was in B Company right next to us, and he written up his story, very compatible with mine or vice versa. After I sent him that, he sent me a letter on this. So we're moving up, and about, I don't think it was more than 15, 20 minutes, somebody stepped on a shoe mine. And the first time we heard the word medic. And up to then, everything was quiet. By the way, we had no packs, no gas mask, nothing but ammunition, canteen, shovel, maybe a key ration in your pocket, a couple of hand grenades in my case on the suspender, the BAR ammunition suspender. I weighed 50 pounds. So here we're moving across. And I'm moving like the rest of them. Then a firefight, the flares came up, guns are being, other people setting up tripwires, and going across barbed wire. And I just absolutely, totally exhausted myself carrying at least 50 pounds. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't a mortar guy or a bazooka guy or somebody that didn't carry 50, but it's generally known that the BAR man carried some. The weapon alone was 22 pounds. That's 3 times, almost 3 times, 2.5 times the M1. We carried 240 rounds. They carried 120, usually a bandolier, which I did too. Steel helmet, canteen, at least 50 pounds. And I have a sketch on that too. And I'm honestly laying on the ground. And this sergeant that I mentioned earlier, Sergeant Sparks, my platoon sergeant, was a Montana 5'8", only 215 pounds of sheer muscle. And he just came, come on, Hunky. Hunky, they called me because I came from Hungary. Hunky, move out. I can't, I'm too tired. Come on. Well, my friend said I chickened out. Well, they were all chickened out. So I joined the crowd. But no, I was just absolutely exhausted. So he grabbed me by my suspender. And when I sketched this one, I was very honest about it. That at first I sketched out, then I was laying on the ground, and I thought that was an overkill. But, he lifted me up and started dragging me up. He wasn't said that I'm giving you orders, he just dragged me. Well, it gave me a few minutes of rest. All right, I get up and go. And so my sketch reflects the total exhaustion, being scared. Hell, if anybody said they weren't scared, they must have been a bank robber or something. And we had one. Then I moved on. I can't believe him.
That is lovely. You have a tremendous eye. And so here's a picture of your sergeant dragging you up to Corona?
No, up toward the top. We started
from Corona up to Belvedere.
Right. It was about halfway up, and then I made the rest. We all did. Born in Austria.
What I'd like to have you do for me is just talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a citizen of Europe. What did it mean to you to come over and be with the 10th and go back and fight to free Europe? Okay. You're unusual that way,
Okay.
that.
Well, in 1939, it was pretty obvious to some people in Europe, a lot of them not, And I lived in Budapest, but the German expansion and their attitude and Hitler and all of that is going to involve all of Europe. Historically speaking, Hungarians fought World War I on the German side, and they probably be either forced or joined the German forces. We were not refugees, we were immigrants. My mother was divorced. She had a boyfriend that later became my stepfather. And she just had 3 boys of military age. I was the youngest at 17. This is now 1940. And she was working the embassies to immigrate out of Europe, Australia, Argentina, Canada, these kind of countries. And they had all restrictions, and the quota system wasn't open. It turned out that she was born in Fiume, which now is Rijeka, and now is Croatia, but it was Italy when she was born there. And the Italian quota was open. Mussolini wouldn't let him leave. And next you know, we got Italian approval, U.S., get our passport and everything. And we paid actually a second class, we came on the last Italian ship over to the United States. We were the original. My oldest brother was 21. He was going to be called up in the next 3, 4, 5 months. We were the original draft evaders. And we came over here. Well, the war breaks out. First, my oldest brother gets drafted. My next 2 years older than I am. My oldest brother is 3.5 years older. He's nothing but muscle, but he's got enlarged heart. He's classified 4F. He was 6'2" at 215 pounds of sheer muscle, but he's a 4F. I was going to ROTC in Oklahoma University in school, and I was exempt from draft until I finished college. Well, I fell in love and married, quit school, and caramba, I become eligible to be drafted. As I mentioned it earlier, I had an industrial accident working at General Mills for about 9 months before I got drafted. I was blind on the left eye. They drafted me anyway. I was probably the only one-eyed BAR man in a regiment. There must be some distinction for that. So then I went to basic training at California, St. Louis Obispo, where I also got my citizenship paper in 6-8 weeks. And I volunteered for a 10th Mountain. At the end of the training session, I was the highest scored on a rifle range. They offered me OCS. I didn't make the. I said I will do that when I get to the 10th Mountain. Well, that was a mistake because 10th Mountain had a lot of people with college degrees that weren't officers, and I only had 2.5 years. I applied later on, and then I find out that I wouldn't have passed it anyway because my eye.
How did you feel about going back to Europe as a citizen of Europe?
I never got politically involved. I didn't like the war. I won't say that. But I wasn't anti-German. I wasn't anti-Italian. That was my duty. I was drafted. I went in, and I didn't make a big political situation out of it. We used to joke on the front line, when I want some volunteers for the night patrol. Well, nobody volunteers, so they can't blame themselves blowing their leg off or getting worse. And we used to joke. We used to say, Eleanor doesn't like war. I don't like war. We used to joke all the time, if a president and his wife doesn't like war, what do he thinks about us? We understood that this was the time. There always were a few who really believed in the war. Most of us just served because we were called.
What does it mean to you personally to have been in the 10th Mountain Division? Does it mean a lot?
I was in the Army in total 2 years. A year and not quite about over a year and 3 months I was in a 10th Mountain, or maybe a year and a half. It was a unique division, no question about it. The caliber of the people, the intelligence level, their background, skiing, mountain climbing, mule skinners, the whole mixture was pretty interesting. But I'm a realistic. In terms of other divisions, we were one of the last, if not the last one. We took pretty heavy casualty per day, but a lot of other divisions fought longer, but it doesn't matter. The average infantryman, which in our division was a rifle company, is 4 times the casualty of the artillery or the support units. It's a killing field. There's no fun to be in it when you see blood all over and you're exposed to that situation. But the average regiment in every division, the average is 6 months in a rifle company. It doesn't matter how long the division was over. The individuals, the 45th Division went in Africa and was into the whole Italian campaign. And there was 12 people, statistically, there was the original ones that survived out of 14,000.
Does it mean a lot to you?
I just joined the association in 1988. I enjoyed a lot of it. I've been active in it. I've been president, local and national, executive committee, and so on. I don't think about it that much. I have to be honest about it.
Well, what kind of legacy does the 10th Mountain Division leave?
Well, it's a highly trained, cocky, self-assured, let's call them, active division that done an outstanding job for the 3.5 months of combat. Now, if you have a minute, I'll tell you one more interesting thing. I made a speech at the school, a grade school level, and obviously was going to tell them about blood and all that. So what will I talk about? Other than me being a hero, that's no good. All this blood is no good to talking to 12-year-old or less aged people. I decided I'd talk about the comfort level. When you really think about it, we were in combat about 120 days. 80 days of that, I figured, and I checked this with other guys, 80 days of the rifle company, I didn't have a pack, I didn't have a blanket, I didn't have anything but my clothes, layers of clothes, I spent in a foxhole. Either sleeping on mud, or sitting in it, or at least being in a foxhole half time at night because one of us was always awake. Most of the time I slept during the day if we were holding the line, or if moving, we were there. I think then I had 1 week off in a hotel. I think I took a shower every day. I know there was a bunk and sheets. I ate warm food. And the rest of the time, which is about 20, 30 days, what you call reserve, but still within artillery range. That means I took a shower on an average of every 10, 12 days. No, and from the time we jumped off, because we were there 4 or 5 days before, till I got wounded, which was the last day of the war, 26 days and night I had the same clothes on, no toothbrush, no shaving, no haircut. When I got to hospital, they cut off the clothes. I mean, it was so stinking that even I couldn't stand it, you know. They didn't wash it. I don't care if your underwear is khaki in color. It's a mess. And nobody talks about that.
I think most kids would think that was a good deal.
Yeah, and somebody says, is that like camping? I said, yeah, you go 26 days without the same clothes. It'd be like camping.
Is there anything else briefly you want to say in the remaining minute?
I have several things put together. One was